Welcome to JetsCentralRadio with Mike O'Connor and Joe Caporoso from TurnOnTheJets.com.
Everywhere, I used to cop in Harlem. All of my Dominicanos right there up on Broadway. Pulled me back to that McDonald's, took it to my stash spot, 560 State Street. Kicks me in the kitchen like a sinners with temptation.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Turn on the Jets Central Radio. We are back with our 5th episode, 4 in the books already. It's unbelievable to even think about that. I'm Joe Caporoso, owner, editor-in-chief of TurnOnTheJets.com. I am now again joined by my co-host, Mike O'Connor, who is back from his brief vacation up to Nantucket. How you doing tonight, Mike?
I'm doing great, Joe. Vacation was all right. Back and ready to go.
I hear ya. I just got back from a brief vacation of my own. I went out to Chicago for 5 nights, actually, for 4th of July. Great city. In my unofficial, completely biased rankings of American cities that I've been to, I put it a small cut below New York, right on the same level as D.C. I put Philadelphia and Boston somewhere down in the 400 to 500, somewhere around like the Newark, Elizabeth range. But Chicago, great city. I highly recommend visiting it. Got to see Soldier Field. Actually, there was some random soccer tournament going on that I bought tickets for, so I was able just to go in and walk around the stadium. Very cool stadium, I must say. You see a stadium like that, you get a little upset that we've been dealing with the Giant Stadium and now the huge Slinky in MetLife. But anyway, tonight we have 2 terrific guests. We have Vincent Frank, featured columnist over at the Bleacher Report, terrific NFL writer, and then Chris Wesseling of NFL.com, the NFL Network, everywhere. Hard to miss Chris if you're following the NFL at this point of the year. We're very excited about both guests. We're going to have Vincent on in a few minutes. Just updating a few things we've had on the site the past week. We've been very busy with content, been really happy with the level of stuff we've been putting out. Today, we had an article from Connor Rogers looking at D. Milner, and a guy who's kind of been glossed over a bit. This is a topic we've touched on. Despite being a top 10 pick, we've heard minimal amounts about him, and he's really a guy who's going to probably step in and start from day one. I know, Mike, you had a Twitter conversation with a few people about that today where you think Milner is going to be a starter from day one, and that seems to be the consensus among most Jets fans, no?
Yeah, I got a lot. I actually asked generally just the question of who do you think should start, or do you think there should be any training camp battle? And the fans all responded. I think I got like 8 or 9 responses saying just Milner right out of the gate, not even considering a training camp battle. It's just interesting to me because I've actually been back and forth. I wasn't really on board with him starting right away because I thought, well, if you have the luxury of playing Kyle Wilson, then why would you play him? But as I go deeper into it, I kind of realized we've already seen Kyle Wilson's ceiling. We know he's an average player, subpar, kind of one step behind the game with his instincts, both in the slot and outside. So I think if you can have the luxury to play Milner now, and that's a luxury because he can just learn in his rookie year, I think you do it. I think Jet fans agree with me.
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on Kyle Wilson. I don't think he's a good starting NFL cornerback. I think his ceiling is, a capable nickelback. People fight with me on this a lot. Go pop in the Seattle tape or the Miami tape from last year. He's just consistently out of position, consistently struggling to locate the ball in the air. The light hasn't gone off yet. He's had 3 full seasons at this point. Milner's a top 10 pick. He's a top 10 talent. Get him in the starting lineup from day one. Also today on the site, I wrote an article on 5 early narratives about the 2013 Jets and kind of examining how true or false they are. Got a little bit long-winded, but definitely check it out. We talk about the Jets defense, talk about their schedule and how difficult it actually truly is. I know a lot of people are writing the Jets off because of their assumed very difficult schedule. While they do have a tough stretch in the middle of the year, I do think it's a little more manageable than some people give it credit for. And also Mike is working through a series looking at everybody on the roster's safety of making the final 53. We've got through part 1 this week. Should we look for part 2 a little later this week or early next week?
Oh, no, definitely a little later this week because I had a lot of it done, but of course WordPress totally just decided to fold on me, which is frustrating. So yeah, I'm almost done with that second part actually, so I can have it out in the next 2 days, I think. So look forward to that.
All right. I think we are ready to bring in Vincent Frank, who is a featured columnist over at the Bleacher Report. We're going to talk Jets, AFC East, maybe a little big picture AFC, and I think we're good to go with Vincent.
This is Darren Wall, quarterback of the New York Jets, and you are listening to Turn on the JetsCentral show.
All right, and we are back with Vincent Frank, featured columnist over at the Bleacher Report. Very happy to have him on tonight. Vincent, how you doing?
All right, Joe. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you passing these final weeks before training camp finally kicks off? I know it's a somewhat quiet time in the NFL schedule.
You know what? I'm always keeping busy, man. I have 2 different jobs, and Bleacher Report's just one of the things I do. So it's just still crazy in May, June, July, and getting ready and getting excited for the start of the preseason. Like a month away now.
I know. Cannot wait over here. Even though we are Jet fans, we are still excited. But one thing, one article that you wrote, actually it was about a month back, you went through every NFL team's secret weapon, and when you got to the Jets, you went with Chris Ivory, a guy that, we love over at our site. We have been talking about the Jets trading for Chris Ivory literally nonstop since the beginning of last year because none of us were big Sean Green fans. When it finally happened, you can imagine how happy we were. Is there reason to have that much optimism about Ivory? Do you think, like I think, that if Ivory can stay on the field for 16 games, he could be a 1,300, 1,400-yard back?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think there's no reason to believe that he can't shoulder the load. Put up, 320, 330 attempts and do what he does. He never really got a fair shot with the Saints. Obviously, there's different reasons there. They drafted running back in the first round in Ingram. They were pass-first offense with Drew Brees, and he just never had a shot there. But you got to remember, he was your leading rusher as a rookie back in 2010. And with 715 yards. And his size at 6'2", 222, he seems to have the ability to be able to actually shoulder the load. He's not a CJ Spiller type player to where he might struggle running between the hashes. So I see no reason why he can't do that. The big thing there for Ivory will be able to pick up pass protection in front of Geno Smith, Mark Sanchez, or whoever is starting under center.
All right, Vincent, thanks for coming on. This is Mike. I had a general question.
Hi,
if you could highlight one position battle that you're looking forward to, or you think is going to be intriguing for the fans to watch during training camp for the Jets, well, who'd you say?
I'd say for the Jets specifically, I would probably be looking at free safety. Antonio Allen, Josh Bush, who's going to step up, both drafted for 4th. You guys have Dwan Landry at strong safety. Jaquan Jarrett, he didn't really pan out in Philadelphia, so I don't know if there's much upside there. But I really did like Antonio Allen coming out back in the 2012 draft, and I think he could be a good player to slot in there at free safety. The other one I'd probably be looking at would be, I'm not sold on Antonio Holmes coming back from the Willie Frank injury. That was a horrible injury to watch. I watched it. I'm obviously a 49er fan, and I had a hard time with that one. So who's going to be able to step up into the number 2 role if Holmes is not able to do that? I'm figuring Stephen Hill will be the 1A, 1B target. Will Jeremy Curley be able to step up his game enough to help out whoever is under center?
Another guy, kind of along in a similar situation or similar, looking at back an article you wrote about guys who are kind of under the radar who could step up for each team. And when you got to the Jets, you had mentioned Demario Davis at linebacker. Do you think has a skill set or is equipped to really be a 3-down linebacker, immediately, this season? I mean, he got last year to work behind Bart Scott a little bit. He'll obviously bring a little more speed, but I know in Davis's limited reps last year, there were plenty of times he looked a little out of place or just a little skittish at times. Do you think he's ready to be a competent starter in year 2?
I do. He was one of my favorite small school players coming out of the draft back in 2012, and I really thought the Jets did a good job picking him up in the 3rd round. Obviously, coming from a small school, the assignments are going to be different in terms of coverage in the NFL than they were coming from Arkansas State. But he does seem to have the talent level and the physical ability to do it. Now it's up to the Jets coaching staff to step up and help him understand when and where to drop back into coverage, what holes to fill, what passing windows to close. that type of stuff. He had a deer-in-the-headlight type of look a couple times last year. But that's to be expected from a small school prospect making his first appearance in the NFL. So David has Pro Bowl potential, and you throw him out there and you see what he can do with good coaching, and I'm going to say a lot of New York Jets fans will be pleasantly surprised in 2014.
All right, Vincent, I have to ask the inevitable question. If you're Rex Ryan, when are you looking to start Geno Smith, or are you looking to start him in 2013 at all?
No. No, you put him on the bench like the 49ers did with Kaepernick. Mark Sanchez is Mark Sanchez. Pro Football Focus had him rated out as the second worst starting quarterback last year in the NFL. You throw him to the wolves because you're not expecting him to be your future quarterback. The Jets don't have the weapons in place on offense, mostly at wide receiver and tight end, to be able to step up and help out Geno Smith. And as much as I like Chris Ivory, he's still relatively unknown as it relates to being able to shoulder the load. I think he will, but you don't have that running back. TJ Manuel in Buffalo, he will have to just throw a Fred Jackson. He has a pretty good wide receiver over there. The situations are different between him and Geno. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we obviously, this is something that's been debated a lot about the quarterback situation. Looking at Mark Sanchez, do you think, I think this is probably his last year in New York. I'd be shocked if he was back here next year. It would take a bizarrely effective season from him and the Jets for that to happen. Where do you think his career goes from here? Do you think he gets picked up somewhere and gets given a shot to compete for a starting job? Do you think he goes somewhere where he's a clear-cut backup? Do teams still look at some of the tape from him in 2010 and say, hey, this is a guy who's played a couple strong playoff games. There's something there. It just clearly went completely off the rails the past 2 years. Where does his career go after he finishes out with the Jets after this season?
The best thing for Sanchez would be able to go to a stable situation with a good coaching staff, a good quarterback coaching staff. Not saying the Jets don't have that. What I'm saying is that they're not in a position to be able to utilize that and have him sit as a backup for a year or two, regain the technique that he jumped out onto the team in the NFL for 2 years, led the Jets to the AFC Championship game twice. He obviously has the skill set to be able to succeed, but he needs to have the coaching. And he needs to be able to sit behind a stable situation and succeed. The Packers, Aaron Rodgers, would be a good fit for him to back him up. Don't see the field at all, but just learn from Rodgers, learn from the McCarthy, and go from there. San Francisco Kaepernick would probably be a good situation as well, learning from Jim Harbaugh. But if he goes to another team next year and he's asked to be thrown in, starting and learning a new system with a new player personnel and new coaching, it's not going to work out well.
All right, kind of branching off from the Jets here, Vincent, I was going to ask about kind of the Dolphins, because some Jets fans have been noticeably nervous about the Dolphins maybe taking the next step this year in the division race to try to catch the Pats. What do you see from Ryan Tannehill? Do you see him taking any significant strides towards becoming maybe not elite quarterback, but a very solid starter?
Yeah, I was surprised by how he performed last year. I was not high on him coming out of Texas A&M in 2012. I didn't think he had the experience or the technique down to be able to do what he did. And he caught me off guard by what he was able to do. Obviously, there were struggles there. He wasn't able to progress his technique reads too often. He struggled with pocket awareness, ball getting batted down to the line. But the talent is there. He's uber talented, and he has the physical ability to be able to do it. If Lamar Miller steps up at running back, a lot of people think he will. And then you have the wide receiver, and then Dustin Keller coming over from the Jets at tight end. Yeah, the Dolphins could really surprise and catch a lot of people by surprise in the AFC East. Even without Hernandez and Gronkowski, maybe Gronkowski for the first couple of weeks, losing Brandon Lloyd, the Patriots still have to be considered the favorite because they have Tom Brady. He makes rotten bread look like Jewish rock. It's just the way he is. He makes any marginal wide receiver look like a Pro Bowl type player. So unless Tannehill can really step up and put up 4,000 yards and only turn the ball over 7 or 8 times, it's going to be the Patriots' position to win.
Working off the assumption that New England, Baltimore, Denver are probable division winners, who in that next tier of teams do you think is going to step up as being a playoff team this year? Whether it's Cincinnati, whether it's Pittsburgh bouncing back and getting into the playoffs, does Houston take a step back? Who are you keeping an eye on after that kind of consensus top three of New England, Baltimore, Denver?
And I wouldn't call it consensus nationally. I think Cincinnati is favorites to win the AFC North over Baltimore.
Really? Wow.
Baltimore was able to replace Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and what they did on the field last year, but they're not able to replace the leadership and the quarterbacking mentality. If you think Matt Elam and Arthur Brown are going to be able to do that as rookies, you're sadly mistaken. It's just not going to happen. The vacuum is going to be there, and who's going to fill it? Nobody in 2013, and that's really going to impact Baltimore's defense. Joe Flacco is going to miss Anquan Bolden, and let's face it, if Anquan Bolden was not on the Baltimore Ravens last year, they would not have won the Super Bowl. It's that simple, because Flacco was able to throw the ball up to him any time and come down with it. His playoff run was ridiculous. I'm talking about Bolden, of course, here. Cincinnati has talent. They go 9-10 deep at defensive line. They go 6-7 deep at wide receiver, 2 deep at running back. I think they're the clear-cut favorites to win that division.
Interesting stuff. So while we're on the topic of talking about how teams are going to finish, Vincent, what do you think should be a realistic target for wins for the Jets? And what do you think will save Rex Ryan's job, quite frankly? How many wins do you think?
With Rex Ryan, he's in a rock and a hard place, because if this is the make or break year for him, if you really want to rely on Mark Sanchez to do that, if the ownership group of Woody Johnson has given him some leeway, maybe he'll go Geno Smith. It depends. I would say the realistic would be 6 wins. I'd say 7 wins if they get lucky, and 4 wins if it just really gets out of hand. Meaning if Geno Smith has to start and he looks like a chicken with his head cut off. So between 4 and 7 wins, but probably looking at 6.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable number to look at. I think a reason for optimism on, being at least a 6 to 7 win team is that their team last year won 6 games, and they were arguably the least talented team in the league by the end of last season when they were playing without Holmes and Revis, and with who they were running out with at tight end and receiver, because Keller was also hurt, and how bad Sanchez was playing. It's almost like, how much worse can their quarterback play be than last year, and how much worse can their offensive talent level be than last year? This was a team that was starting Marty Gilliard and Clyde Gates down the stretch, and was stuck with Sean Green at running back. Doesn't have the same kind of firepower that Ivory or potentially Mike Goodson could have. But do you think that it's smart, when you bring in a new GM like John Idzik, do you think it's just smart for him next season, barring the Jets, winning 8, 9, 10 games and sneaking in the playoffs, to just cut the cord with Rex and, go with his own guy?
That would be conventional to assume that a new GM and new front office wants to go in there and get their own guy at quarterback and at head coach. We have to face it. Rex Ryan had more success as a Jets head coach and any head coach probably for that organization over the last 20 years. So you have to think about him from that context, too. He had when he had a team to work with. If you look at the Jets front 7 right now, it is stacked. Wilkerson is one of the better defensive ends in the NFL. You got Kendrick Ellis, Sheldon Richardson's a great player. Quincy Copeland, really outside linebacker. We already talked about DeMario Davis. So he has the functioning ability in the front 7, and even with from Mark Hughes and Kyle Wilson in the secondary and D. Milner, to have a really good defense. So if they're able to win 7 games and they show improvement on the offensive side of the ball, if I'm Idzik, I probably think about sticking with mine. But if it falls apart completely, then Idzik would be justified to change it up. Listen, the Jets are in a good situation when it comes to their general manager. Comes from Seattle, comes from a very stable front office and head coach relationship. If you look at all the best teams in the NFL, they have one thing in common. The GM works really well with the head coach. If Idzik is not able to do that and have a functioning relationship with Ryan, then he's going to be gone. And it doesn't matter if the Jets win 9 games. If they don't have that relationship working, Idzik's going to cut ties.
Yeah, I definitely think that John Idzik is doing the right thing in developing this relationship with Rex, and I think moving forward it's the best option for the Jets to stick with Rex Ryan if he doesn't totally collapse this year, assuming he doesn't, since the team will ride on its defense. So while we're on the topic of John Idzik, Vincent, what would you say were his best off-season moves this season?
I would say the draft. Chris Ivory. Getting Chris Ivory, it was for a mid-round pick? I love that. Or even a late-round pick? I absolutely love that deal. High upside, not really much, didn't really give up much. The draft is really where I think the Jets hit on. To be able to get Sheldon Richardson. I didn't like it at the time, but then I realized the Jets were switching up to defense a little bit. He was one of my top 10 players in the entire draft. D. Milner was the number one quarterback in the draft. But Geno Smith, a guy that I am high on as a future starter, projected beyond 2013, to get him in the second round was an absolute steal. And the Jets might have gotten their franchise quarterback if they handle the situation right. And I think he will.
All right, Vincent, we really appreciate you coming on. We covered a wide range of topics here. Where should our listeners look for your content, and where should they follow you on Twitter?
Definitely. They should follow me on Twitter at Vincent Frank NFL. Check out www.edraft.com. I'm the head editor over there. We're doing some really good stuff. And then just search my name on Bleacher Report or search the top writer each month in the NFL page, and I'm always up there. So, yeah. You can find me there. I'm always down to communicate and talk on Twitter, as most of my followers know. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks again, man, and we'll be following you all season.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you guys having me on, and you guys having yourself a great summer.
All right, we're back. We got a few minutes here before Chris Wesseling is going to join us from NFL.com, the NFL Network. Want to give a quick shout-out to one of the new sponsors, Onnit.com. Go check out Onnit.com/football radio, and our listeners get an automatic 10% off their vitamins and supplements at the site. They have a wide range of products there. Definitely recommend checking it out. Endorsed by A.J. Hawk, among other people. So check that out. Real quick before Chris comes on, want to build off a point that Vincent made, and I know Mike agrees with me on this topic. We are very, very big fans of John Idzik's approach in his first draft as the Jets GM. I think what you saw, despite a lot of pressure on him, was straight sticking to the board and taking the best player available in every spot. And I think you can make a reasonable argument that the Jets got the best corner in this draft, the best defensive lineman in this draft, and arguably the best quarterback in this draft. And D. Milner, solid pick at number 9, excellent value there. Sheldon Richardson, excellent value where the Jets got him in the first round. And then Geno Smith, a guy who was considered by many to be a top 10, top 12 pick, getting him all the way at 39 without trading up or sacrificing any picks. I mean, that's a hell of a start for Idzik. And beyond that, I'm pretty sure they got their day one starter at guard in Brian Winters in the third round, a guy who I think could be here for a long time and will be a good physical player for them. And then you look into the fourth round, getting Chris Ivory is going to be your starting running back with that pick, and then filling out the offensive line depth in the later rounds with Abouche and William Campbell. What did you think, Mike? I mean, you're even more so into the draft than I am. What were your initial reactions to Idzik's approach?
Oh, I love John Idzik's approach, and I think it's a perfect Jets draft. John Idzik comes in, and first he gets D. Milner, who we can all agree is the best corner in the draft, and then Sheldon Richardson, who, let me say, was my number 1 overall player at one point.
Hey,
and I think January, I had him going number 1. I think if we look at the big picture here, I think that we have a starting quarterback, franchise quarterback for the future. And I think on defense, we criticize the Jets on defense for not addressing offense, but of course everybody's criticizing the offensive flaws and how it's such awful depth there. But on defense, I think he's going with his strong points. The corners are elite with Darrelle Revis there. Now he's gone, so you have to fill that up. And if you got an elite secondary, even with Darrelle Revis gone, you can continue to roll with that and have that be a strong point for the team. And I think with Rex Ryan's love on the defensive line, if you keep that very versatile with Sheldon Richardson moving around, and you keep it one of your top-notch positions on a team, I think that can carry your team, and that lets you focus on the offense and then build on that. So I think as you just look at the Jets draft, you look at the bigger picture and not just the players, even though the players are great too. I think that you're looking at the future and you're thinking, well, now the Jets can build on offense because the defense remains strong. Sorry about that again. My bad.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's reason for optimism. And something else Jet fans should remember that, we're going to be looking at a lot of cap space next year, and there's going to be a talented free agent class, and you're going to have another draft where you're looking at likely 12 picks after compensatory picks and after the Revis trade. So plenty of reason for optimism on the long-term rebuild. We're actually going to break here and get ready to bring Chris Wesseling in of NFL.com, so we should be with him any minute now.
This is defensive back Eric Carter from the New York Jets, and you are listening to JetsCentralRadio.
Football fans, looking to get healthy this year? Now is the time, and I have the perfect place for you. Save 10% at onit.com/football radio. Exclusive PFC radio listeners save 10% off their order. That's onit.com, ONNIT.com/football radio.
What's going on, Jet Nation? You're listening to Antonio Gray, defensive line, New York Jets, and you're listening to Turn on the Jets, Central Radio, baby. Be good all day, every day.
All right, we are back now with Chris Wesseling of NFL.com, the NFL Network, and really just about everywhere. You really can't miss Chris as you're getting ready for this 2013 NFL season. We're very happy you took the time to stop by. Chris, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good. We are getting excited. We're only 17 days out from endless stories about the Jets quarterback battle and Rex Ryan's job security. It's exciting times.
I can't wait for it.
We'll start it right there with the Jets and with the quarterback situation. Who do you think ends up starting day one for this team, and what do you think would be the right decision for them, as a starting quarterback?
Well, I guess what's fascinating to me is that the right decision for Rex Ryan is probably polar opposite of the right decision for John Idzik. So that dichotomy is kind of it's going to be the story to watch in training camp, I guess, because Rex's job is on the line. I would assume that he's counting on Mark Sanchez to bounce back from a year where he just had no confidence. So I would see Sanchez as the favorite. Geno Smith probably has a higher ceiling, and I don't think Sanchez would even be on the roster if it wasn't for his guaranteed salary. So that's another interesting factor. But in my mind, Sanchez is the favorite, and he's probably the best bet for Rex Ryan, although if I was John Idzik, I'd probably be pulling hard for Geno Smith.
All right, very interesting stuff. So, Chris, I was wondering if you could go outside of the quarterback position. If there's one breakout player you expect to really surprise some Jets fans out there on the roster, and it's just the roster so depleted of talent, who do you think that can step up and surprise a lot of people out there? If you could pick one guy, who is it?
I think the most obvious candidate is Chris Ivory, if he can stay healthy. He's kind of a poor man's Marshawn Lynch. He's been plagued by injuries. He was 4th, 5th on the depth chart in New Orleans, so he hasn't gotten a chance, but he runs with so much power. He's an explosive guy. He hasn't been much help in the passing game, so I wouldn't expect him to play on third downs, but he's a guy that could break out for 1,200, 1,300 yards.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement around the fan base about Ivory just from watching Sean Green run the past few years, and I think we all know how thrilling that has been with 0 missed tackles and 0 runs over 20 yards. Hopefully Ivory will bring a little juice to the backfield. Couple stats I want to throw at you. You let me know if you think over/under on these. Ivory, 1,200 yards rushing. Quentin Coples, 8 sacks in his second year. And Santonio Holmes coming back from injury, let's say 55 catches.
I will take the under on Chris Ivory because I just don't trust him to stay healthy. He never has in the past. And running backs by nature, that's just a physical position. So I'll take the under on him. I'll actually take the over on Coples. I think that's exactly where the over-under should be, 8 sacks. Maybe he gets 9, 9.5, 10. The Jets certainly need him to do that. They need that speed on defense. And the last one was who?
Holmes.
Santonio Holmes.
Catches.
I'll go with the under again because I don't like anything I've heard about his Liz Frank recovery. It's just gone on so long, and I heard the New York Daily News say, at the Jets' most recent practices that, as far as they know, Holmes hasn't even started jogging yet. So I would expect he might be a candidate for the PUP list to start the season.
Yeah, the home situation definitely isn't great, and I think everybody's worried about that right now. Kind of branching off of that, the wide receiver position is so bleak with talent, but other positions on the Jets, like free safety, for example, inside linebackers, the depth is poor. You could criticize right tackle, Boston Howard goes down, and tight end, of course, with just Jeff Cumberland out there and Kellen Winslow. Who do you see, or what position do you see that can hurt the Jets the most in 2013 because of its lack of depth or just poor talent?
Wow, you covered it pretty well there. You've got a lot of question marks. And probably the national media overrates some of your strengths too, but I think that wide receiver has to be the biggest question mark. It'd be different if Holmes was healthy, if we thought Stephen Hill could catch the ball reliably. There's just not much depth there. I'm guessing Jeremy Curley will be the best receiver on the roster for most of the season, but I don't think he's a number one. He's more of a slot guy, so I think that's a major problem for them.
Looking back over on the defense, and any of the optimism that's related to the Jets in 2013 is built around the hope that, hey, if you have Rex Ryan, you're going to have a competitive top 10 defense, and really the focal point of that defense is going to be the defensive line this year with Muhammad Wilkerson, with Cole, with Sheldon Richardson. Is there reason for that high level of optimism with the Jets, front seven and defense and defensive line, in particular?
I think there is. My question with that front seven last year was just speed. They needed young legs, and I think they have that now. Copels, and I like Demario Davis entering the starting lineup. I think that's going to be an upgrade. Sheldon Richardson, like you said, and Wilkerson was a Pro Bowl caliber player last year, so I really like that front seven.
All right, Chris, with all the optimism we're throwing around with the front seven, do you think the Jets are at fault for kind of depending on their front seven, the overall defense in general, to carry them and maybe get them to an average season? Because we were talking about it earlier. The Jets they drafted on defense early. They built up their defense because it's obviously going to get them through the season. Do you think they're at fault for not focusing more on the offense in the off season?
No, I don't think so. I think they can be at fault for drafting poorly and making bad decisions in the past. The Mark Sanchez contract in Albatross, the Tebow experiment was a disaster. I think Mike Tannenbaum really kind of put you in a bad spot there, but I don't know that we can fault them for going defense. They had so many holes on the entire roster, so as long as those picks pan out, I don't think it matters what position they play.
Let me ask you a question about Sanchez, and I'm always curious to hear different people's opinions on this. After his tenure with the Jets is over, which will be after this season, where do you think his career goes from here? Do you think he could be a capable starter in the NFL again anywhere? Does the team look at the tape from 2010 when he had his positive stretches and say, we could coach this guy up and get something out of him, or is he just a lost cause at this point?
Well, I think it's a little more nuanced than that. I think maybe someone who liked him coming out of college does look at the tape from earlier in his career and say we can coach him up. But I think even at that point, he's going to have to compete for a starting job. I don't think he's going to be handed a starting job by anyone next year or the year after that whenever he leaves the Jets.
All right, kind of looking at a more general question, Chris. In terms of the division, with all the negativity we're bouncing around with the Jets, do you definitely see them finishing in last in the division? And do you see Buffalo or Miami taking the next step that people are talking them up to make?
I really don't. I'm always leery of teams that spend so much in free agency like Miami did. I do like the Mike Wallace signing, even if they overpaid for him. I think a guy who can draw and beat double teams and add that speed element to your offense is good. But really the rest of the signings I wasn't crazy about. And we know how free agency works in the NFL. You have to be a little bit leery of guys who the other teams decided we don't want these guys. They weren't good enough for us to sign them. So obviously there are going to be a few red flags there. So I don't know that that's the recipe for success. And I guess with the Dolphins, the way they've been the past decade and a half, I need to see it before I believe it. The Bills, I'm intrigued by what they're doing with that coaching staff. They've got a lot of talented young guys on the staff. To me, they're still in full-fledged rebuilding mode, though, and they don't have a quarterback. So I don't know if you can contend without an established quarterback.
On the topic of Buffalo and their quarterback situation, coming into the draft, would you be happier taking E.J. Manuel where Buffalo took him, or just sitting and waiting, taking Geno Smith at 39? Who do you see who got better value with their quarterback, their quarterback taken in the high end of the draft this year, the Jets or Buffalo?
Well, I have to come clean and say I don't watch much NCAA football at all, so I'm not one to really have a major analysis on these guys coming out of college. But to me, if you deem that E.J. Manuel can be your guy, if he has all the tools and the intangibles, and that's what you decide, then I'm all for it. Even if you're taking a risk, if that's who you're behind, go for it.
All right, Chris, well, we're still in the division. With all the chaos that's happened to the Patriots with Hernandez and Gronkowski going down and possibly not coming back for about a month, Lloyd's gone, all these holes on the defense are now coming up. Do you see the Patriots running away with this division? And I know, since you're not high on Buffalo and Miami, they'll probably win anyways, but do you see them kind of maintaining their dominance and still winning 11-plus games this year?
Honestly, I do. I like their defense a lot better than most people. I think they'll be much improved in that area. And as long as they have Tom Brady, they're going to be fine on offense. They're going to run the ball a lot. Maybe Gronkowski makes it back by mid-September. I think the Patriots run away with the division.
Who is a team in the AFC that not a lot of people are talking about is going to challenge for a playoff spot? I mean, outside of the, New England, Baltimore, Denver, generally people who seem to think those three teams are the top in the conference. Cincinnati's got a lot of buzz, but who's more of an under the radar team who's going to challenge for a playoff spot this season?
That's a tough question. If Cincinnati's ineligible for this question, I guess I'd fall in line with the Titans. I get, the Colts made the playoffs last year, so they're probably ineligible for this question too. The Titans, they have an interesting blend of talent. I don't really trust their coaching staff, but I think they've drafted pretty well, and they really addressed the offensive line. If they get some defensive improvement, I think they could be a 10-6 team.
All right, while we're talking about the AFC, I kind of want to go over to the NFC and just, are you on board with all the Seattle and San Francisco hype? I know I am, because I love the additions and how they drafted. But do you actually think that they're Super Bowl contenders at this point?
I think they have the strongest roster in the NFL, and I love the Percy Harvin signing. I thought he was one of the top 5 players in the NFL last year before he went down with the season-ending injury. And with the offense they're running, he just gives them so many options to move him all around. So I love their offense. They're going to be explosive there, and they had the number 1 defense in the NFL last year. So you've got an explosive offense, number 1 defense, then you add Percy Harvin on kick returns, and your special teams are more dangerous now too. So I think Seattle's the favorite, the Super Bowl favorite in my mind.
Taking it back over to the Jets before we let you go, what do you think is their ceiling win total this year, and how many wins do you think it's going to take for Rex Ryan to keep his job?
I would guess if everything breaks right, their ceiling is 9 wins. Okay. And I would say 8 to 9 wins is about what it would take for Rex Ryan to keep his job.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable number, a number that, if they're going to overachieve, which I think many people would say they overachieved if they got to maybe even 7 or 8 wins, just that, why, cut clean with Rex, who's had, compared to other Jet recent coaches, has had as much success as anybody, if not more so here. Do you really think he's like one of their major issues right now? Would you be quick on the trigger to move on?
Absolutely not. I don't think he's one of the major issues at all. I think he's coached up with the talent they've given them and won more games than should be expected. I think the talent there, he's always overrated that talent, and he has no trouble telling the national media how great the talent is there, but I think unbiased viewers can say they weren't all that talented all along, and Rex got the most out of them.
All right, Chris. Well, we really appreciate you coming by. Everybody, make sure they're follow you on Twitter. It's just at Chris Wesseling, right?
Yes.
And Chris will be churning out content over at NFL.com, and make sure to give him a follow. We'll be following you all season. Thanks again, Chris.
My pleasure, guys. Have a good one.
Good to come on, Chris.
All right, that was Chris Wesseling of NFL.com, NFL Network, among other places. Two terrific appearances from our guests tonight. We're going to keep that coming, in the coming weeks leading up to the season. We're only a couple weeks out from training camp at this point. Over at Turn on the Jets for the rest of the week, we'll continue to be loaded with content. We have Mike here. He's going to finish up his piece breaking down how safe everyone is on the Jets roster. I'm actually going to be going back through some defensive film from last season and looking at some of the fronts that the Jets ran. I mean, again, everyone loves to peg Jets as a 3-4, even though they run a lot of 4-2 nickel slide, a lot of 4-3, a lot of 46. So I'm going to look at some of those different looks and who's going to slide into, the spots on this year's roster now that, Sione Pua, Bart Scott, Brian Thomas, Eric Smith, thank God, are all no longer around. Make sure you're following us, on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, very active, good interaction over there. On Twitter, at Turn the Jets. You're following Mike, at O'Connor_Jets, and the rest of our writing staff, which could be trapped over just by going at About TOJ. We'll be back next week with another new episode, another slate of guests. So thank you for listening. Mike, you got any send-off words for the good people out there?
Not much. I definitely recommend following all of our writers. Bounce around a lot of good stuff. A lot of great content from the site recently. Thanks to Chris Wesseling for coming on. Congrats on his 21,000 followers that he just reached tonight. And Vincent too. A lot of great stuff. A lot of Jets talk. And have a good night.
All right, everybody. We'll talk to you next week. Stay civilized.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.